Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Resistance podcast. Today we're here in Northwest Leicestershire and we're joined by Andrew Bridgen, formerly MP and now fighting a general election campaign. Andrew, do you want to introduce yourself in a minute for people who haven't heard of you or who may vaguely recognise you?
My name's Andrew Bridgen. I've been the MP for Northwest Leicestershire, my home, and where my business is, since 2010. Formally elected as a Conservative 4 times, each time with an increased majority. Never really responded well to the whipping system, to be honest. Shouldn't really have been an MP. The Conservatives said that the Conservatives could never win in Northwest Leicestershire. So I had to put my own money up for the local council elections and the general election. And in fact, David Cameron came here in 2008, said this place was a dump in front of my constituents and that I wasn't going to win. And they weren't giving me any money. So I thanked him for his visit, said if that's what he thought, he should never come here again, and we would win. And David Cameron does keep his word sometimes, because he never came again. And I won in 2010 with the second biggest swing in the country against Labour. So moved 4,500 Labour to 7,500 Conservative. One jump lifted the majority to 11,200 in 2015, despite Theresa May's best efforts with her manifesto and the granny tax in 2017, lifted it to 13,300. And having led Leave for the East Midlands, the Get Brexit Done general election in 2019, a majority of 20,400, 63% of the vote, and there were 6 candidates on the ballot paper. My track record, I got into politics, I was a pretty successful businessman. Was chairman of the Institute of Directors for the East Midlands in the late 90s, and used to socialise with a whole load of small and medium-sized business people on a Friday night who were always moaning about the state of Northwest Leicestershire and the government and the council and everything. And I think it was 1 pint of Marston's Pedigree too many, and I said, that's it, I've had enough. We moan every Friday, it's always the same, everyone's moaning. There's no one else. There's only us. You stand for the council. Your wife stands. You stand. The council in Northwest Leicestershire had been basically Labour since '83 when it was formed. I'd built a factory in Northwest Leicestershire and invested about 10 million to create 300 jobs in 2000. I knew how appalling the planning department were and how anti-business. And I'd also served on the East Midlands Regional Assembly. And when I said to them I was building a new factory on a sort of 7-acre site in Northwest Leicestershire, they said to me, you do realise you're building a factory in the least business-friendly planning district in the whole of the East Midlands. Well, I remembered that, and it was true. It was my experience as well. And so I put the money up for the district council election leaflets in 2007, and we won with the biggest swing in the country and took Labour down from control to only 5 councillors out of 38 in one night. And the sitting Labour MP wasn't a bad guy, Christian socialist, David Taylor. He did shed a tear that night, and he announced 6 months later that he was going to retire rather than fight me at the general election. And sadly, very sadly, he got embroiled in the expenses scandal, which really affected him badly. And he dropped dead with a heart attack on Boxing Day 2009. And because we would have given Labour a real good spanking just before the general election, Gordon Brown didn't call it. So we went nearly 6 months with no MP, which is against the rules.
That sounds unconstitutional.
Well, when I won in 2010, I had a backlog of 6 months casework because David Taylor was very good constituency MP, and that didn't resonate well, the fact that there was no MP for 6 months. But that's what actually happened. So a bit of precedent was set there. Northwest Leicestershire was always considered by the Conservative Party and generally that this was the poor relation in Leicestershire. Colville, where we are now, that was considered the most deprived town in Leicestershire. And people tended to talk the area down. Well, when I got elected, I didn't talk the area down. We talked the area up. And we've delivered with the councillors I put in, we've delivered for Northwest Leicestershire. So we have consistently the highest economic growth in the country. We've brought a lot of new business in. The old Labour regime locally was so anti-business that no one would even apply to build a factory or housing or anything. So it was a bit like fallow ground, really. Didn't take much tending to get it going. And so with a pro-business attitude, 1.2 jobs in the constituency now for everyone of working age. So we're a massive importer of labour, which also means that there's a huge demand for labour. And so we're now the only part of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland with above average UK salaries.
So you've gone from the poorest to the richest part of the county?
It took 10 years. Took 10 years to deliver that. And you've been round parts of my constituency.
And you're also building a lot of houses, but you're not just building the normal houses.
No. The government have adopted, 10 years ago, I presented to the government what we were doing in Northwest Leicestershire, which was, we called it Building for Life, better by design, lifting the quality of the built environment by demanding better design for housing.
And I'd just like to speak to this. I've been going around with you all day, and I've seen houses that, if not for the modernity of the brickwork, how new the brickwork is, they look like they could be 70, 80, even 100 years old. They're absolutely beautiful. The new houses that you're building are absolutely beautiful. And you tell me they're 3 years old.
Yes, and I presented it, well, it was so long ago that Nick Bowles was the housing minister. I presented it to Parliament, to the government, and it's taken them 10 years. I think it was last year they agreed to roll it out over the whole country. They call it Building Beautiful. Yeah, we call it Building for Life, better by design. And
I'm sure a lot of people are fed up with the absolute horrific brutalist architecture that is popping up all over the country.
Well, housing's a long-term investment. It's, as I said to you when we were on the ground, it's not just about the current owners or current residents. It's a long-term intergenerational investment for the area. And to build it better designed housing, over the lifetime cost of the house, it's peanuts. And it just makes the whole environment much better. So anyway, the government have eventually adopted something we've been doing in Northwest Leicestershire for more than a decade, probably 12 or 13 years. So we're well ahead of the game, and that's why our housing stock has been so improved. And of course, because we build 800 odd new houses a year, the jobs are here anyway, so people want to move in, the salaries are here. It's an attractive place to live. We've got great communication links with the M1, the M42. We've got our own airport at East Midlands. If people, what do people want? It's also one of the most happy places to live in the Midlands on the happiness index, which is not surprising because when I speak to my constituents, what they want is they want to be able to get a job locally. They want to probably be able to get a partner who's got a job locally that's paying decent wages. Between them, be able to afford to buy a house locally, pay the bills, go out on a Saturday night and go on holiday once or twice a year. I don't think that's asking too much, but we can deliver that in Northwest Leicestershire. We can deliver all of that. It's not asking too much.
And you've done this, I know you've had help, but this was your impetus and your drive that you've managed to completely turn around this constituency.
Well, when I first became the Conservative candidate for Northwest Leicestershire in 2006, I had 4 years of working the patch before the election. I mean, the current leader of the council, who'd always never been in control, when I said we're going out canvassing, and he said, no, we don't wear rosettes. We try and just pretend we're independents to get in. I think there were five or six councillors that the Conservative Party had before. And I think we didn't have many members, and they hadn't put a leaflet out in 10 years, and never put a full slate of candidates for the elections, which is why they didn't get voted in.
And right now you're fighting a general election campaign, and you need help.
As an independent, because, I committed the cardinal sin in our Parliament and told the truth. And as you know, no good deed goes unpunished for long in that Parliament. But I don't regret any of it.
I've seen the affection that people have for you in this constituency. People do love you, and you have huge recognition around here. However, you are up against the major parties. And are you calling on people to come down here and help you?
Yes, please. Anyone who can and is able to come and help before the election, deliver some leaflets, knock on some doors. Anyone in the constituency who wants to put a poster up, that would be absolutely wonderful. Every bit of help. It's going to be very close, I think. I had two of my former Conservative councillors came to see me 5 days ago and told me the Conservatives are out of it without you. It's only you or Labour can win this seat now, and they wish me all the best.
And they're voting for you.
It's a secret ballot. I wouldn't want to ask them who they're voting for. And of course, if they admitted that, they'd be kicked out of the Conservative Party as well. What's left of it after Rishi Sunak has finished with it? So you know why we're having a general election now, don't you, Will?
Well, you said before that it's because he doesn't want to be a wartime Prime Minister. What do you mean by that?
Well, I've got my informants in the Ministry of Defence, and Rishi Sunak had told them 6-8 months ago that the generals, the admirals, and the air vice marshals that he doesn't want to be a wartime leader. And the information I've got is that we've got British personnel. They won't be classed as service personnel now, but they will have been in our military very recently. We're firing British missiles, Storm Shadow missiles, out of Ukraine into Russia, being controlled by UK citizens. And so the Americans are doing the same with their weapons. The Germans, the Poles, everyone else is doing it. The French, they're all doing it. We're actually at war with Russia now. They just haven't squared it with Parliament, haven't told Parliament officially, they haven't told the people. And this is escalating. And, we believe in, nuclear deterrence, which is why we've got our Trident submarines with our 215 alleged warheads. We haven't got that many. And we've got those because people don't attack us because we're a nuclear power, and we're constantly poking the Russian bear in the eye that's got around about 6,000 nuclear warheads. Doesn't make sense at all.
And they could wipe us off the face of the earth.
Yeah. And also, if you think about it, since 1991, the end of the Soviet Union, we've moved NATO 1,000 miles nearer to Russia. Russia hasn't moved nearer to us. And Putin's been telling us for 10 years, I'm not going to let you put nuclear missiles on my border in Ukraine. And what did the Americans do when the old Soviet Union wanted to put nuclear missiles in Cuba 90 miles off the Floridan coast? We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well,
nearly ended the world.
We're going to go there again, I think.
Does Trident actually work?
Well, I thought it was pretty bad that they tested the missiles twice in the last 6 months and didn't put a D notice on the fact that the missiles failed. I don't know what sort. If anything should have had a D notice on it, that should have done, but it was just widely reported. It's almost like but there's a lot of very strange things going on, Will, isn't there? Because our nuclear missiles, we advertise the fact that they don't work. Well, at the same time as the government are pushing and saying we need conscription and national service because we might be going to war, they shut the last steelworks in the country that can make weapons-grade steel for armaments, and they're trying to stop our farmers, reduce the amount of food that our farmers are producing, when historically, whenever we've gone to war, our opponents have tried to starve us out because we only produce about 55% of the food that we actually consume. None of this makes sense. And I can see why Rishi Sunak is bailing out. But I imagine being, the hedge fund manager that he is, he's got his financial positions all geared up to make an awful lot of money out of a war. You do know that Germany and France have already passed the legislation. They can enact conscription at a moment's notice. And the EU are preparing to sell war bonds to investors to pay for the war. And the problem with selling war bonds is that you actually owe someone a war then, don't you? Yeah. We need some sensible heads. We need some statesmen in the House of Commons to stop this madness, because all that a war with Russia will give us is a lot of grief. it'll probably involve then China and Iran as well. We could easily get it escalate into a full world war. And war, the only people who win out of it are the super rich, and it buries the poor.
Well, Putin said that he will use nuclear weapons if Russia is threatened. So is there actually a way of winning any war against Russia?
Well, if it goes nuclear, no one's winning, are they? But
Do you think he would?
Yes, I think he would. I've got defence analysts feeding me information, and they're in, services, and they're saying that there is going to be a nuclear detonation in Europe.
Who by?
Well, it could be a dirty bomb. I mean, there's a lot of nuclear material floating around in Ukraine from their nuclear reactors. I mean, to create contamination, all you need is some conventional explosives and some nuclear material, and you've got a dirty bomb. They may have already been set off in the Donbass area now.
And that could be the false flag that starts the war.
Yeah. There's many ways it can be done.
Like 9/11.
Like 9/11. And the other reasons for having general elections is that, Rishi's maintained that he's got inflation down to 2.3% and his plan's working. Well, if it was really working, he'd be waiting till the autumn to demonstrate it's working more. The fact is, he knows that food price inflation is going to rocket by the end of the summer. And that's going to be no relief on interest rates whatsoever. So this is as good as it gets for him on the economy. It's got to have an election by January next year, so there's no respite from the high interest rates. And the other thing is, of course, the disastrous and ineffective Rwanda bill for dealing with the illegal migrants. That was only ever for show. Anyone who'd been in Parliament for more than 5 minutes looking at the list, it wasn't robust enough, not leaving the European Convention of Human Rights or the Treaty Convention on Refugees. All it was going to be is a blank cheque for lawyers to make a lot of money. There's more chance of you and I going to Rwanda than any illegal migrants, I can promise you. And of course, if he waits till November, that's going to be very apparent that no one's going to Rwanda. So again, it's as good as it gets for him.
I think the max numbers were something like 3,000 or something like that. Like, they don't even have capacity for more than so many thousands going to Rwanda.
So that's hold below the waterline before it starts.
So anyone who votes Tory is just voting for some people who are just actively lying to them.
Yeah.
And they have to, everyone knows. It's a joke at this point. Everyone knows they're actively lying. So if you're voting Tory, you're voting for just active liars.
You're deluding yourself. Yeah. And of course, the narrative of safe and effective is basically destroyed now. No one really believes it. And there's more and more evidence of the vaccine harms and the excess deaths around the world that they've caused. And by November, I think the position will be pretty untenable on that. So I don't think Penny Morton likes facing me on a Thursday for my penny dreadful questions at Business of the House.
I want to speak a little bit about your record on this, because you are one of the very few, if not possibly the only MP who's come out in opposition to this. When was it that you woke up to everything that was happening? What made the penny drop for you? Because that's where most people are going to know you from.
Yes, but that's not all I've achieved in my political career. But yeah, I made two big mistakes. I had 2 doses of Pfizer, and the second one really hurt me. My gut was telling me not to have them, but I did. Huge mistake. My degree, a long time ago at Nottingham University, was in biological sciences with biochemistry, specialising in genetics, virology and behaviour.
So you are the most expertly placed MP in Parliament to judge on this. You are the expert.
So. I would have thought, yeah, and I've tried to keep my knowledge up in that area because I only did it because I was interested. And when I saw, eminent scientists, leaders in the field who were speaking out and raising legitimate concerns about the efficacy and safety of the vaccines and the lockdowns and the pandemic response, and for them to be shut down, cancelled, denigrated, ridiculed. I mean, that's just not the way that science works. I mean, science has got to be there to be challenged, and thesis, counter thesis. I mean, I was told by lots of doctors on their last day at medical school before they're qualified and go out there to practice that they're told that half of what you've been taught in medical school will be found to be wrong within 10 years. So you're going to have to constantly retrain because the science is always evolving. So whenever they tell you that the science is settled, whether that's on climate change or the vaccines or anything else, I mean, that should be a huge red flag because that's just not the way it works. Just not the way it works. And I was speaking to a lot of eminent scientists. I was reading the papers, the scientific papers, and thinking about it. I voted in, I think, 2021 against Plan B. I voted against the mandates for the masks and the NHS mandate. I voted against the government every time. And my scepticism only grew from there. Also, during the lockdowns, the suicide rate skyrocketed. I could see the police were informing me we were having more suicides in a month in Northwest Leicestershire than we normally had in a year. And I just couldn't see that was a reasonable response to a virus with a 99.8% survival rate, where the average age of mortality was 83. It just completely disproportionate. And I mean, since then, now we know that we had 1 million under 25s on the waiting list for mental health support following the lockdowns. I watched small and medium-sized businesses go to the wall, and everyone's health and well-being was affected. We now found that the quality life years adjusted, the QALYs, the government were told that even implementing the first lockdown was going to take 1 million years of quality life out of the UK population, and they still did it.
You're really well known for coming out against this. I know you were also heavily involved with exposing the post office scandal as well, and you were essentially the core in fighting back against that. Do you want to explain a little bit about what happened?
Well, I mean, unluckily for the government, Michael and Susan Rudkin were my constituents. They ran the post office at Ibstock, historically, very successfully for many years. And Michael Rudkin and his wife came to see me very soon after I was first elected in 2010 and told me an unbelievable story about how they were wrongly accused and prosecuted by the post office. And the story he told me was, on the face of it, unbelievable. And they were convicted, basically criminals. But they'd been pillars of the community for years. And I looked at them, and they looked clearly broken by the experience they'd been put through. And I thought, why would you, if you're not telling me the truth, why would you come here and rake all this up again? Because
they'd already been punished.
They'd already been punished.
So there was nothing
there for them. They were coming and telling me, there's nothing, what can I do about this? And I believed them. I just couldn't see any reason why they'd come and lie to me. So I went and made some investigations and said to the other MPs at both ends of the house, across the house, and said, has anybody else had someone who was formerly regarded as a pillar of the community who's suddenly been prosecuted as a sub-postmaster for dishonesty? And amazingly, 4 other MPs said they had.
But they hadn't gone and found other MPs, they hadn't raised it.
No, but then we had a meeting of those MPs, and Oliver Letwin was involved. He claimed he'd got a constituent, but you have to bear in mind that he was ultimately the cabinet minister in charge of the post office, and as we know now, was planning to privatise it. So I do have my suspicions about his reasons for being in the group. And what Mr. Rudkin had told me is that he'd run the post office in Ibstock for many years, and he was actually had the honour of being selected as the representative for all the sub-postmasters in the UK. So he passed the day-to-day running of the sub-post office to his wife, Susan, and part of his duties as the National Sub-Postmasters Federation chairman, he was invited to Fujitsu's headquarters in Bracknell for a visit. And Fujitsu had created and operated and supported the Horizon computer system that the sub-postmasters had to use. And he went down there and signed in the visitors book, and he believes that they mistook him for someone else. They showed him all around the building as normal, but then they took him down into what he says they called the boiler room in the basement, and he saw lots of IT engineers on terminals operating what he recognised as being the Horizon system. And he got talking to them, and he asked them what they were doing, and they said, well, we're sorting all the glitches out. And he was told that they were doing it remotely without the knowledge of the sub-postmasters. And they had a lot of problems they had to sort out. Obviously, Michael Rudkin, my constituent, knew that in court, when they were prosecuting sub-postmasters for fraud, they always said that any shortfalls had got to be down to the sub-postmaster, because nobody could alter the accounts remotely without them knowing about it. So that knowledge immediately made all the convictions unsafe.
And do you want to talk about how many convictions there were people sent to prison for this?
We met the 5 MPs, 3 Conservative, 2 Labour. We met with the Post Office, Paula Venables. She always arrived in Parliament to speak to us with 2 lawyers, one either side of her, very reserved. And we met with the sub-postmasters, and they were very grateful for someone even listening to their claims. And I managed to ambush Venables into a position where she'd said that the system is absolutely perfect. No, it's a Rolls-Royce accounting system. Perfect. No glitches. No one's ever had a shortfall because of problems with the system, she told me. And so then I put her in a position where in the meeting she couldn't refuse to let us put forensic accountants in to check the system because it's perfect.
And that's when you were able to find the glitches?
Well, I managed to get in, instead of one of the big 4 accountancy firms, I managed to get a small boutique forensic accountant firm that I knew, and I knew that Ron Warmington and his firm Second Sight were of the highest integrity. It was probably going to be the last job that Ron did before he retired, and I knew he'd do a good job. And what I did say to the government was, I said to Oliver Letwin that the Cabinet Office have got to pay for this, and he insisted that the Post Office were going to pay for their own investigation. And I said, well, then what the problem with that is, the moment that Ron Warmington and his team at Second Sight find anything, the Post Office are going to squeeze them because they're paying. And he said, no, they won't. And that's exactly what did happen. Within months, Ron and his team were finding problems with the Horizon system, problems in the contracts between the Post Office and the sub-postmasters, which he regarded as feudal in nature. It was very one-sided. And in the end, very shortly after that, Ron Warmington, the chief investigator, was having to leak me unredacted reports because the Post Office were censoring and redacting reports that he was making before they were allowed to come to the MPs. So the cover-up was continuing to the point where, when the Post Office found out that the investigators were leaking, passing the reports unredacted to me, myself and James Arbuthnot MP, they then tried to prosecute the investigators for breach of contract, but exactly as I predicted they would do. But fortunately then, a Fujitsu whistleblower came forward shortly afterwards and verified everything that Michael Rudkin had said. And it's also interesting, when I initially wrote to Fujitsu on behalf of Michael Rudkin, my constituent, Fujitsu came back and said that Mr. Rudkin had never been on their premises. And I said, well, he says he signed the visitors book on this day. And I've seen the emails where you invited him to the premises as the chairman of the National Sub-Postmasters Federation. He's never been here. I said, well, what about the visitors book? And they came back and said, we lost the visitors book for that day. I mean, the lies, the cover-ups and the lies. And when the Fujitsu whistleblower came forward, he verified everything that my constituent had said.
And what's been the effect? So how many people have been affected? And what has this done to people's lives?
At least 1,000 criminal convictions of sub-postmasters. 736, but then there was a pilot and it was probably another few hundred. So what actually, when they put the Horizon system in, and I've got to the bottom of all of this now, the Horizon system was created by Fujitsu for the post office, originally to pay benefits from the post office, but they could never make it work. And the then Labour government had invested, under Tony Blair, had invested £800 million in this computer system. They didn't want to write it off. £800 million is a lot of money now. It was an awful lot of money in the late 90s. So they made it into a retail package and told the post office it was perfect and Fujitsu were going to manage it, and it never was. So Tony Blair, when he stood at the dispatch box and bought it in, he knew there was a lot of glitches in the system and it was full of bugs. And he stepped back for 20 years and watched those people go to prison and never said anything. He knew.
And it's destroyed lives.
It's destroyed marriages, it's destroyed relationships. People have committed suicide. Partners of people have committed suicide due to the shame. I mean, my constituents who are completely exonerated and innocent now, I mean, they said that people were spitting at them in the street.
It's ghastly.
They had 11 years of that. Mrs. Rudkin was one of the first 9. I got her conviction overturned. It was December 2020, the first 9 sub-postmasters. They still haven't had the compensation. So all this stuff the government are saying about we're going to fast-track all this compensation through legislation because you have to have the convictions overturned before you can start claiming compensation, and we're doing everything we can to sort this out. Well, my constituents didn't need it. We'd already got their criminal convictions overturned 3.5 years ago, but they still haven't had the compensation.
Because you're their constituency MP, and if they hadn't have had you, and I mean a lot of people around the country are lucky that you were.
Well, I stopped them. The post office was trying to confiscate their property, their house.
That's their home. An Englishman's home is his castle.
Yes, but it's no different to the 40 years of the infected blood. I've got a constituent in Bobby Angwin. He's actually American. He lives in Castle Donington. He can never vote for me. I've represented him for a decade. He got infected blood transfusion. He's got hepatitis. He's pretty ill, and he hasn't had his compensation. We can talk about it all they want to. And the worst bit about that, the review that was the public inquiry that was announced, the results of the week before the election was called, it wasn't only the fact that it was covered up and the harms were done, but they actually had a school for children with haemophilia where they deliberately infected them with HIV and hepatitis, just as an experiment to see what would happen. And in the review, it's a 2,500 page review of the whole thing. It actually names politicians who've covered it up. And it also said that one of the doctors had said that using those school children was cheaper than buying chimpanzees.
It's disgusting. And
as I said in the chamber of the House of Commons, that statement, crimes have been committed, and it's a crime to cover up a crime. When are the arrests going to start? And if that has to be current or former members of the House of Commons or the House of Lords, then so be it. People are only doing these actions because they think that they can get away with it. We're in the frightening situation where the justice system and policing is really there to police the ordinary people. It's not for the elites. They're not in that. They don't want to be in that system. And that was the same with the sub-postmasters. And it wasn't just the 1,000 or so sub-postmasters who were criminally convicted. What I actually know now is that the post office had got their brilliant Rolls-Royce computer system, and they put Fujitsu on a penalty clause of £20 for an incomplete transaction, any transaction failure. And you can imagine how many transactions the post office has a day across the whole of the UK. A lot. Millions and millions and millions. Well, it turns out they were having thousands of failed transactions a day. And Fujitsu didn't want to pay the post office £40,000 a day in penalty fees. So it was far cheaper to employ all these IT engineers and just put it right in their basement. But because they were dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of bits of data every day, I mean, humans being humans, someone presses the wrong button, and then suddenly there's a massive shortfall in a post office. Fujitsu weren't going to admit it because they shouldn't have been doing it. And part of one of the first things that Ron Warmington and his team did was look at the accounting system. And I don't know if you're aware of any computer accounting system, but if it's double entry bookkeeping, money has to be moved from here to here. What you also have in every one of those systems is something called a suspense account, where you will stick a transaction before you decide which nominal code to put it under, whether it was so it goes into the right pot. It's not where you leave things indefinitely. He found out that the suspense account on the Horizon accounting system was normally in credit at the end of the year by about £1.5 million, that these transactions were never solved, and after 4 or 5 years, the board of the post office were adding it back to profit and taking bonuses on it. Money that, I mean, can you imagine goods or services that people, this is money credit, so that people had paid for goods and services from the post office which they hadn't had.
And they just stole it.
Well, I think if you add all the money over the time that they ran Horizon that was surplus in the suspense account, that will pretty much add up to the money that they extorted from the sub-postmasters. And it wasn't just the 1,000 who were criminally prosecuted, because thousands and thousands of sub-postmasters would have found shortfalls, been threatened, and put their own money into the till to make up for the problems. I had another constituent, he arrived some years ago, and he said, he asked for a meeting with me and said, I want to talk to you about the Post Office Horizon system. He said, you won't know much about that. I said, I might know a bit more than you think. And he'd come from, I think from the New Forest. And his story was that he'd been running a post office and it was okay. And then all of a sudden he said, I started getting shortfalls every month, £200, £300, £500. And I was constantly, because they are liable for any shortfall, I was putting my own money to make the till right every month. At the end of every month, I'm short. So I keep putting this money in. And after 18 months of that, he said, I've just told the post office I don't want to play anymore. Get someone to take the post office over. I can't make any money. All my wages as the sub-postmaster, I'm putting back in the till to make up for these shortfalls, which I can't account for. So they did. And he said that they came and did an audit then, obviously for the handover to the new sub-postmaster. And he said, when they did the stock take, he said, I even gave them £70 out of my wallet to balance the books on the last day. And said, we signed, I said, that's it, we're done. And he came to Northwest Leicestershire and he was pretty much bombed out with it all. And he said, all I want to do now is, my mother's very old, very ill. I'm going to be my mother's carer and put that all behind me now. And so all he had to live on was his carer's allowance.
That's nothing.
Yeah. And he said 6 months after he'd signed that it was all balanced, the post office came back to him and said, no, we need another £1,500 off you. And they stopped it out of his carer's allowance. They will all get compensation now because this wasn't down to them. It was just their glitches in their system.
So what was Ed Davies' involvement with this?
Ed Davey was, during the coalition years, 2010, 2015, he was the minister in charge of the post office. And what's shocking is that he took consultancy money running to hundreds of thousands of pounds from the firm of solicitors who were prosecuting the sub-postmasters.
And now he is the leader of the Liberal Democrats, arguably the third or fourth biggest party in the country. And he may be in line to even be leader of the opposition, depending on how this election plays.
Yeah, well, he's in the club and they look after their own, don't they? I did meet over it early in the coalition years. I met with Vince Cable. And it's very interesting because Vince Cable's got to go and give evidence at the post office inquiry under Judge Wyn Williams. And he's written to me asking if I can tell him the date of the meeting we had because the civil service notes have disappeared.
Oh, it's funny how things disappear.
I know.
It's convenient.
That's amazing. That's amazing because the civil service notes have disappeared. And he said that I was the only MP while he was Secretary of State for Business who ever came to him to speak to him about concerns about the Post Office Horizon system.
So the rest of them just left it because they weren't working for their constituents. It's funny how things disappear. I recently interviewed a man named Charlie Staple, got violently attacked by the police, and the main body cam footage, it just sort of disappeared.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
The police have tried framing me. I'm surprised that all the footage didn't disappear in that case. But I'd like to speak about the sort of bigger picture of this country for a second. Since 1971, or even before then, we've been on this fiat currency system. Nearly every country in the Western world is under piles of debt. So you look at our debt to GDP ratio, and it's around 100%. I believe it's gone over 100% at the current moment. However, you look at our pension liabilities, it's a Ponzi scheme. We owe something like 7 times or more the GDP. That's everything that everyone earns in terms of income in this country for an entire year. We owe 7 years. So if you were to tax every single person in this country 50% of their income, with providing them 0 services, it would take about 14 years to pay that back.
We are in an unsustainable system. I think the fiat money system, the Ponzi scheme, has about run its course. And that's why I think the successor program with the same benefactors or beneficiaries is the carbon credits. I mean, how we ever allowed private companies the ability to create money and charge interest from it? I mean, who would ever agree to that? The power that gives those individuals.
And they get to spend the money first, which means they get to spend it when it has value.
Yeah.
So again, there's this disparity between those at the top and those below.
Well, also, when it comes to buying power and influence, if you have the ability to create money from nothing, I mean, most people have their price. It would be like me trying to bribe you with, I'll just give you buckets of air. I mean, money means as much to them as buckets of air mean to me, doesn't it? Give him 5, give him 10. Doesn't make any difference, does it?
You seem like a scientifically minded man. Do the other MPs actually have any clue how the fiat money system works?
No, and they don't want to talk about it.
Any of them? Are there a small handful? Because I remember
there are a few. I mean, I think Steve Baker realised, and he wrote some books about it. There's a few people, but I think that people are just warned off. I don't think it's good for your health.
We see what they've done with you to stitch you up.
Well, they when I did speak out on the vaccines, I mean, of course, they put the you're going to commit suicide, Andrew, in January 23. I had to make a statement on social media that I was not feeling suicidal. They even got welfare to ring me and say that we're here that you're going to commit suicide, Mr. Bridgen.
What?
Yep.
What parliamentary welfare?
Yes. And they said that, I took up, it was surreal. It was straight after my suspension on the 11th of January. And this very, very lovely young lady rang me. I think we finished at 7:30 in the evening, and I was on the way to the flat, and this lovely lady, how are you, Andrew, and all this, and she sounded absolutely gorgeous, and she was from Nottingham University on a degree in psychology, and she was asking about all this, and what do you think's going on with these vaccines, and I talked to her, and I said, I think Annabelle or Sophie, whatever her name was. I said, it's absolutely lovely. After 10 minutes, just lovely to speak to you. But why are you ringing me? And she said, well, actually, I must tell you, I work for welfare, parliamentary welfare system, and we've had a number of people have rung in and warned us that you're going to commit suicide, Andrew. I said, well, I'm not. I can assure you, I thank them for the thoughts for my welfare, but I mean, I hate to disappoint them, but I'm not. I'm going to fight this, and I'm going to prove and be vindicated for the scientific facts I'm bringing forward. And we're not going to vaccinate the babies, the children in this country. That they put that out there. So
that will be logged, and there will be some sort of record.
Yeah. It's all mind games. It's just mind games.
But who was it that rang in? Can you find that?
Oh, no, it's confidential. That's confidential. But that's just mind games. But I mean, You know, I've many media. I've told you that before I was excluded from the Conservative Party, I had a meeting, and they told me, after I'd done an hour and a half of explaining my concerns about the vaccines and also the midazolam and morphine of NG163 and the suspected euthanasia of vulnerable LD in hospital to create the first wave, that after an hour and a half of that I was told that there is currently no political appetite, Andrew, for your views on the vaccines. This is in January 23. There may well be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then. But in the meantime, Andrew, you need to bear in mind, if you continue with this, you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world with all the personal risk for you which that will entail.
Personal risk for you. Well, it seems like the dam is breaking a little bit early and they wanted to hold this
I don't
off.
think they're going to get 20 months. Do you, Will?
No. Well, I just want to read this headline. This is from The Telegraph, and I believe it's quite recent. COVID vaccines may have helped fuel rise in excess deaths. Do you...
No, Sherlock.
Do you feel vindicated?
They've not been suspended. I've called how many times in the last 2 years for immediate suspension of the experimental messenger RNA, ribonucleic acid, so-called vaccines. We're still pushing them. I'm meeting constituents who've taken 9 shots now. Plenty with 7. And we've met constituents today. Every day I go out on the doorsteps.
I saw that lady today who came up to you, and she was a Labour voter, and she said, "You're the one who stood up for this."
And then,
because she knew what was happening, even though she's a lifelong Labour voter.
Yeah. And I meet NHS workers who will tell me privately they know exactly what's going on.
But they won't speak out in public because
they lose their jobs. They know what's... Well, that's consistent. Whether you're a scientist, a doctor, a nurse, midwife, politician, the playbook's the same. They try and destroy you reputationally, financially, and you have to lose your job. That's why I'm no longer in the Conservative Party. You have to be punished. And half of it is to intimidate you and to silence you, and the half of it is for anybody else in that profession to show them what will happen to them if they speak out.
I think what has happened to you reminds me in many ways of what's happening to Julian Assange. Are you an Assange supporter, may I ask?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't have him deported for telling the truth.
Can I ask, you started as a multi-millionaire.
Young Executive of the Year UK in 2000 when I was young.
So you were a multi-millionaire, happily married businessman living in a mansion.
It was a modest 9-bedroom, 10-bathroom, 12,000 square feet.
And this is what you made out?
14 acres. This is a rented house. Oh, yeah, I don't own a house anymore. I don't own a car anymore.
You used to have an Aston Martin.
And a Range Rover.
And now, explain what they've done to destroy you bit by bit, because I know there's corruption all the way through.
Well, my belief that I took my brother and his co-directors who are still in the company, but I own basically half the companies, for fraud. And well, the judge found that they'd been stealing money, but he's done it in such a way that left me with a £5 million cost order. Then he said that I could buy the company for £3.5 million, pay my brother £3.5 million, didn't let me go on the board, and by the time I got to when I could buy the company, I find that my brothers took the company insolvent. So I'd be giving my brother, as a punishment, I should have given him £4 million for his half of the company, basically, less £500,000 that he'd stolen. And then I'd have been giving him £3.5 million for a company I'd have to shut down the next day and put it into administration because it was bankrupt. And that's what the court... Now my brother's trying to take me for bankruptcy for not paying him £3.5 million for a company he's bankrupted.
So how did this...
And they've also stopped me getting I had about £2 million in my private pension before I became an MP from my business. And they've run that into the ground as well because that's in a SAS and I don't have any control over it. HS2 bought my mansion off me. I'm the only MP had to sell his house to HS2.
How much was your house worth?
Well, I paid 2.2 million for it in 2011. I'd spent 110,000 of stamp duty. I paid 2.1 and £100,000 for the fixtures and fittings. It was actually 4 houses in the grounds and 14 acres of parkland round it. It was nice. An 1805 rectory, very beautiful. And I spent 100 grand improving it. And because I was getting divorced from my first wife, we had to sell the house. HS2 was running right in front of it, and it was valued at £800,000. 5 years later, so the judge said you've got to sell it to HS2 under the extreme hardship scheme. So I didn't have any choice, and getting involved, I saw how they did all this, and this is such a fraud. It's such a blatant fraud. It's a land grab. They have not paid, Will, the right price for anybody's property, except probably Boris Johnson's dad's, Stanley. Probably paid him the right price for his property, all the way along the line. And the system is completely corrupt, how they've bought the houses. So you go into the system, the government's going to buy a house off you for HS2, a house, a land, or a factory, or anything along the route. They have a system where they've got 10 valuers. They're all London offices. And there'll be some names you'll recognise, like Savills probably, and Knight Frank or whatever. And they'll say, you choose, well, I need to buy your garden shed. You choose one of these valuers. They'll come out and value your property, whatever it is, land. I'll choose one as HS2. If they're within 10% of each other, we'll split the difference, and that's what we're going to pay you. And that sounds fair, doesn't it? It sounds fair. But it's not fair, because think of the psychology of it. These, the 10 valuers, are going to value all the properties along the whole line. This is thousands and thousands of properties. It's a lucrative business. You've only chosen one at random, unless you knew any of those London offices, which you won't know up here in the Midlands.
And so you didn't have any choice outside of that?
No, you've got 10.
And you have to choose
one of the 10. Now, the moment you've chosen one off that 10, you've done all you can do for them, and they're going to get their fee paid by HS2. They all want to be the one that HS2 chooses every time, because HS2 gets to choose when it buys your house, the house next door, the one next door, right? Now, do you think HS2 were choosing the valuer who puts the highest value in or the lowest value in?
So all of the incentives are in place. It's basic
drive it
economics.
all down, drive it down. And I said to Chris Graining, I said, I've sussed out how you're buying everyone's houses so cheap, yeah? And I went to Hugh Merriman, he's not standing at the next election. I said, right, Hugh. He said, no, that's not true. That's not how we've done it. I said, well, in that case, Hugh, that purchasing scheme's been running since 2013. It's been running for 11 years. You must have bought tens of thousands of houses and fields and everything. I said, so with 10 valuers, if it's perfectly random, just tell me, release the data, how many times you used each of the valuers. And it's going to average at 10% each, because it's all random, isn't it? When the ones that you choose are all random. They wouldn't release the data because it's not all random. They've been using ones that will put the lowest price in. And of course, the one you've chosen, they want to be the one that HS2 chooses next time, so they'll try and put a lower price in than the one that HS2 have chosen.
So they all pony up.
So it's all pressure to buy down. So the house owed me 2.5 million. The mansion in Appleby Magna. 5 years after I bought it, HS2 paid me 1.89 million for it.
So they stole over $500,000.
Over $500,000. I thought, being an MP, it was completely wrong for me to deal directly with HS2, so I used consultants, and they cost me £25,000 to do the negotiations to get me stitched up by $500,000. And I said to them after they got the price, I said, well, I'm not happy about the price. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds less than I paid for it 5 years ago, and the underbidder was only 50 grand behind me on the property. I said, how does an appeal work? And this is what the consultant said. I said, Mr. Bridgen, the appeal works that you give us another £10,000. We talk to HS2 for 6 months. They never change the price, and they never will. That's how it works. This is our advice: is you don't give us £10,000, and that's all you can do.
So they took you home from you. What happens if you said no? You said, I will not.
Well, I
give up
had a
this
court
house.
order. I had to sell it to HS2. If I have to sell something to somebody, it doesn't put me in a strong negotiating position, does it?
I don't think having to sell that's not property, that's theft.
Yes, but I've dealt with so many constituents, because the route supposedly was 22 miles through my constituency from north to south. It ran straight through the middle of Northwest Leicestershire, and they've bought so many properties. They haven't paid anybody the right price. They haven't paid anyone along the line the right price.
How many people?
It'd be tens of thousands, thousands and thousands and thousands.
Tens of thousands of people have had their homes just
Or
stolen.
field or factory, yeah.
And
not being given the proper price. But I mean, it's very, very subjective. Buying a house or a field or a factory, they're all different. It's very easy for the government to argue, well, on the day, what is it really worth? The only way to do it, to really find out what it's worth, is to sell it to someone else. Well, you couldn't sell it to someone else, could you? Because no one else wanted to buy it because you've got a railway line going through it. I'll have a bet with you. Coming back to the big issue, one of the big issues in Northwest Leicestershire and the country about illegal migrants. I've managed to get the 2 hotels shut. Also, the government put 51%. There are 7 constituencies in Leicestershire, 3 in the city, but 7 in the county. I ended up with 51% of all the illegal migrants in hotels in my constituency.
because you're persona non grata.
Yes. But fortunately, I think my constituents saw that they didn't feel that I was causing the punishment. It was the government punishing them as well for having me as their MP. Well, I raised such a noise about it in the chamber, they've shut them both down. They're empty now. But they haven't gone, and they're still coming over the channel illegally. Which houses do you think they're putting them into?
The houses that they stole.
Yes. And also houses that they're buying because people are struggling to pay their mortgages because they've ramped up the interest rates. So they're repossessed houses, yeah.
With the interest rates, do you think that we should move back to the gold standard?
We should, or even, can't we go back to silver? We can go back to silver. Anything precious.
Silver's more plentiful, it's true, and it used to be £1 would be £1 of silver. But I think generally gold is an easier commodity.
We can't have this fiat money system. It's going to disintegrate. It's going to come under pressure. The dollar's going to come under pressure. Saudi Arabia dropping out of the petrodollar. The BRICS countries are backing their currencies with commodities, be that gold, silver, diamonds, whatever, and no one's going to want our money.
Do you understand the concept of the global American empire? Right?
Yes.
That basically the petrodollar is based upon. So they invade every single country that threatens to trade oil in a currency that's not dollars.
And they use NATO as their mercenary army to take out anyone who doesn't have a central bank controlled by them.
Gaddafi, you said earlier.
Yes, well, he's one. Syria, Iran, Russia. They don't control their central banks, do they? There is, I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
And many coincidences.
There's a lot of coincidences. A lot of coincidences around, aren't there?
When's it going to collapse?
It depends how it plays out. It's going to be in the next couple of years. Obviously, the Americans will try and not have the banking collapse. I think they're going to push us into a war so that they don't have. They'll say that they then won't have any elections in November. Trump won't get in. They stay in power, and then the collapse will come after that. So
you think they're going to stitch up Trump a second time?
They're trying very hard, aren't they? I mean, they're trying to talk about trumped up charges. They certainly are, and they are so desperate. I mean, they've done so many awful things to Trump. If he gets back into power, he's going to come after them, and they've done plenty of crimes, as far as I can see. Many questions to answer. They're not going to. They'll do anything to avoid that situation. If that means pushing the world into a world war, they will do, because they know that when we get a big war, they can cancel the elections, hang on to power. They're so craven. That's what that's their regard for humanity is so shallow. Yeah. That's what I think.
They're corrupted.
They're totally corrupted.
If they're pushing for this war, Do you think there are enough cool heads, somewhere within the establishment?
No,
to be
I'm not
able to
hearing any.
prevent it?
We had a debate the last week before the general election, and it was on Ukraine, and the Uni Party across the House, they're baying for further escalation of the war and our involvement. They don't want to admit how much we're already involved in this war. I went and met about 4 months ago with Andrei Kelin, who's the
Russian ambassador.
I went and met him at his residency on Kensington Gardens. I was attacked in the press for going and speaking to him. Well, I mean, I think diplomacy is about putting yourself in a position where you understand where the other people are coming from. We talked. I found him a very reasonable.
How do you make peace if you don't speak to someone who's meant to be an enemy?
Well, the people who are pulling the strings and have usurped our democracy, they want war, and so we're not allowed to speak to the Russian ambassador. But I did. I went and saw him, and yeah, he's a pretty reasonable guy. We talked about the Storm Shadow missiles, which he knows that we're operating, because there's no time. We shipped them out, all these missile systems. There's no way we could have trained Ukrainians to manage these sophisticated weapon systems in the time that they have. So,
and they also have their own intelligence from the FSB.
Of course they do.
And so these are British. So British soldiers of British nationality who may be
contractors now.
Yeah, contractors.
Yeah,
but
managing targeting those weapons. Yeah,
but our money is being sent over to the Ukraine to pay those contractors.
Yes.
So it's British money,
British missiles,
paying British soldiers to operate British missiles, right?
And now they're no longer even targeting Russian troops in Ukraine. We're firing them into Russia proper, and so are the Americans, so are the French, the Poles, the Germans, all doing it.
And that's Putin's. That's essentially his red line, because he can use tactical nuclear weapons.
Absolutely, and I talked with the ambassador about the F-16s, and again, he said he wasn't too bothered about the F-16s because he said there's only F-16s are sort of four and a half generation fighter, pretty good, very technical, but they like most technical equipment needs a lot of support, and the Ukrainians have probably only got 2 or 3 runways that are long enough and flat enough, smooth enough to operate F-16s from. The Russians know where they are. They'll deal with those.
Father of all bombs.
Yeah, they can deal with those. But the ambassador said to me, look, he said, if you fly those F-16s then out of NATO countries and hit us, you fly them out of Germany or Poland or Romania or Hungary or anywhere else, and you target us, we will bomb those runways in those countries.
So they will begin.
There will be a war,
yeah,
right?
They will launch missiles
again,
at Poland, at Germany, and Britain.
If we fly them out and hit their troops, yes.
How
also, what you've got to remember, Will, is again these F-16s. We might be able to train in 12 months some Ukrainian pilots. Probably not. They're going to be probably NATO pilots. But each one of those machines probably needs 100 people on the ground, engineers, to maintain them every time they fly. They're going to be NATO personnel who are maintaining those F-16s. They won't have trained all the Ukrainians to maintain a completely alien 4.5 generation fighter they'd never seen before. They're going to be NATO personnel. It isn't Ukraine that's fighting Russia in Ukraine. It's NATO. And the Russians know it.
Well, we do know that I think it might be WikiLeaks, and then it's linked back to Assange, that the Americans were talking about who they were going to appoint as president in Ukraine. So it's clear they think about it as just an appointment. The elections are rigged. Zelensky.
Well, we're not having any elections.
Zelensky's cancelled.
Isn't it amazing that we're contemplating probably being dragged into a war over the security of Ukraine's borders when we've got Europe and even the UK, we've got governments that can't secure our own borders.
Well, if you look at Zelensky, he's embraced National Socialism. But he's got rid of all of the media that oppose him. Yep. He's got rid of all of the political parties that
and some of the church.
He's banned the church. and he's also abolished the elections, and he's fighting a war, funding, with Nazis on the front line, praising Nazis. Boris Johnson's come out and he's brought the Azov battalion.
That's all that. It was
into
Parliament.
London, and I'm not sure whether it was Parliament or not, but holding up their flag.
Yep, which clearly got Nazi symbols on it. And Zelensky apparently is worth about 1.3 billion. I didn't know being a cross-dressing comedian in Ukraine paid that well.
Maybe you should learn to play a piano with your penis. You thought about it?
Not for long. while wearing that costume. Nah.
So you are trying to change things. You're running for this election, but you've talked about electoral change. So what do you think of our electoral system?
Well, from the inside, it just doesn't work. Clearly, the public are being put in a lot of situations, dangerous situations, harm from the vaccines, the NHS is in meltdown. We're probably going to get, not careful, pushed into a war that we don't want, and we are being pushed in. The media is completely controlled, and their biggest power is the power of omission. They decide what is and isn't the news.
So
we've got all this.
When you say that with the media, could I just boil down onto that a little bit more? We've seen the collaboration of the American government with the large social media companies, and we know that some other governments around the world are doing this, including Australia. I believe Brazil was also pushing for roughly the same thing. Do you have evidence that they are collaborating here in this country?
I know they are, because if you look back to 2015 and we go back to the Post Office Horizon scandal, everything that was in that drama documentary that ITV made this year, January, it's all on the record in Hansard 9 years ago. I went round to every media outlet with the evidence. In 2015, I went to the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 News, Sky News, the Telegraph, Times, the Mail, Mirror, and said, here's the evidence. You're a journalist. You print that these sub-postmasters are all innocent. You'll get an award. Nobody would run the story. Controlled. Completely shut down. Exactly the same as I'm seeing now about the vaccine harms and the excess deaths. It's just starting to leak out now. No wonder that the establishment thought they can cover it up for 20 years. They covered the post office scandal up for 20 years, covered the infected blood up for 40 years. They've covered up the Gulf War syndrome, which is actually from the anthrax vaccines that the troops were given before they went out in 91. They've covered that up for 33 years. Why wouldn't they think they're going to cover up the biggest medical scandal in history? They covered thalidomide up for 11 years. When I researched that, safe and effective was the marketing slogan of thalidomide. And Big Pharma, following that scandal, were never allowed to use safe and effective to describe their products without caveats following thalidomide. But they got around it by getting politicians and civil servants to say they're safe and effective and do their marketing for them.
Because then they're not liable for the statements.
They're not liable for the
so
statements.
What they do is they pay the lobby.
Yes,
They pay the politicians. They donate to their campaigns.
And it now appears they paid all the TV doctors as well, didn't they?
How is it that they control the media then?
Money. The mainstream media is struggling anyway, so it's a diminishing pool, isn't it? So they're always looking to get rid of people. People are always looking over their shoulder. Am I going to have a job in 12 months' time? We're selling less papers. We've got less viewers. That's because you're not impartial. You don't tell the truth. We don't talk about the things that people want to listen to. So they're losing market share, and that makes them then more reliant on the funders. And I honestly believe that the government paid a lot of money to the media during COVID to promote the vaccines, the mandates, the lockdowns. I think they did a multi-year deal. Whenever I have asked the government what we're paying for advertising to the media, they will never disclose it. I think those deals are carrying on. So I think they did a deal from 2019, multi-year deals, and of course then that gives the government, he who pays the piper calls the tune. We're back to the post office paying for their own investigation again. Well, if you don't, we're paying you all this money for these adverts we're not taking, and we need it because we've got no circulation anymore. But if you run that story, we'll have to review our policy.
Well, I
And between
guess
that and then you've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding everyone left, right, and so including the BBC. It's money.
And I guess that's why you have independent journalists like us. But I've been in court. I've been threatened, beaten up. I've had my kit destroyed. I've been thrown in a cell, tortured, and I've been framed in court. And they tried to put me in prison. What are your words to other independent journalists? Because do you need people to come up here and cover your campaign? Because you told me I'm the only one who's come up so far.
Yeah, I've got some interviews offered online for the evenings, and we're making our own videos when I'm working with my man. Yeah, but you go against the narrative in this country, and life suddenly there's a lot of coincidences, aren't there? And life gets very difficult. They've made it difficult for me. I mean, it's a fact. I have not had a claim on car insurance for 30 years. I've got a certificate, which has got 12 years no claims bonus on there, which is the most you can have, and I can't get car insurance. My current wife's divorcing me for not taking the bribe I was offered by the government in January 22. Anything I wanted, and I went to seven legal firms, 2 in London, 2 in Ashby de la Zouch, 2 in Colville, and 1 that my cousin by marriage is a partner in. No one will represent me. That's because I'm taking Matt Hancock to court.
You were offered anything you wanted.
Yeah.
By that, you could be, if you had, taken the King's shilling, you could be Home Secretary right now. You could be Foreign Secretary. If you sold your soul, you could be the
I don't know.
Secretary.
I never took it that far. I mean, I played them along a bit and said, what do you mean? Anything. They said, you have to tell us what you want and then we'll give it to you.
You could be sitting on the board of a company making 10 million a year as a consultant who does an hour's work a quarter.
Exactly. And I said, well, anything. They said, yeah, anything. I said, well, if we're playing that game, then I think we better start with, I'll have the Prime Minister's resignation letter. And I couldn't have that. So I couldn't have anything, could I?
No.
So we left it. We left it there.
So explain how it works with the whips. What's your experience with them?
They intimidate those they can intimidate. They try and do favours for you or cover things up, I believe.
What sort of favours will they offer people?
Well,
Do they make crimes that people have committed go away? Do they stop?
I believe they do. I've never been in that situation, I believe that's, we've seen interviews where they've spoken from the 80s about, we like it when a member gets into trouble, maybe with a young boy, and then we can make it go away, and then they're grateful, and then they get a hold on to people.
Do they lay on the young boys and girls?
I have no idea. There's something wrong in our parliament when I'm attacking a Labour MP who I believe is a paedophile, and I'm getting flack from my own party. There's something wrong.
How many of the MPs would you say in Parliament do you think would be of that?
I've no idea. But we certainly had a bad record round here. I'm thinking about in Leicester. I mean, Jana. Paedophilia it's been rampant in Leicester. I don't know that we had the Lord Jana case. He had been the MP there, remember?
Yes,
Greville Jana.
Yes.
Died mysteriously of dementia just before his hearing of facts.
And how many other people would there have been connected? Also, drugs. What, do they bring the cocaine to the party?
I've no idea. All I hear is the reports that when they sweep the system tops in Parliament that they've all got cocaine on them. They're in the civil service as well. I heard the Home Office I heard they did a sweep and in the Home Office it's all hierarchical. So if you're a politician or a top graded civil servant, you get access to these toilets, these washrooms.
Oh.
And they got cocaine on them as well.
So they've got the special Coke toilet.
Yeah. Well, I know that there was, when I had an office in Portcullis House, I mean, I gave up going to party conferences years ago, just terrible. So I used to go and work in Parliament because it's actually really quite nice because it's really quiet and you don't get the protesters outside Parliament shouting all day because they're all at the conferences. It's like a different sort of world, you know. You can walk outside and you haven't got Steve, whatever is braying at you. I mean, it's just wonderful. So, because he'd be at the conference. So I was there, it was probably 3 years ago, and there was a drug bust. An MP's office in Portcullis House was busted for drugs, dealing cocaine.
Dealing?
Yeah, handling cocaine. And I keep well in.
Wait, sorry, is this possession or is this selling?
I think there were more than possession. It wasn't for own use. It was, and I heard this from the security for guys in Parliament. I keep well in with them because they know everything. And I was thinking, well, this is going to blow the roof off. That during conference, when all the MPs aren't there, they've done this drugs bust, and it's got to be an MP's office. And nothing came out. Nothing ever came out. And I spoke to someone who's quite high up in parliamentary security, and I said, I've sussed out why this was. Nothing ever came out about the cocaine bust because they were using cocaine in number 10. They can't go out of number 10 and go and buy cocaine on the street and take it in. So what they were doing is they were getting it shipped into Portcullis House, and they could come over for a meeting, they just take it back into number 10. And I would imagine that if you were snorting cocaine, that the toilets in number 10 probably the safest place to go and take it, and that's what they were doing. And I said this to someone who's very high up in the security department in Parliament. I said, come on, that's what's really going on, isn't it? And he said, of course it is.
Meanwhile, people are being locked up in prison for simply owning a drug. Yeah. Do you think people should have the right to take whatever drugs they like, so long as they're not, giving it to kids?
I think we need to have a review of it. I mean, if we're in a war on drugs, we're not winning, are we? Are we really in a war on drugs? Who's making the money out of all of this?
Well, what it does is it shovels the profits to the gangs. The gangs can use this. They fight over the turf. And then what you have is this hysteria. I'm speaking as a man who always carries a knife. You have this hysteria about knives, that the knives are the problem. Not the fatherless homes, not the mass migration, and not the fact that you've created prohibition, so you've created an entire black market, which can only be dealt with when you've got some sort of dispute. They can't go to court to solve their disputes. No. They can't resolve things amicably, and they can't declare their profits, and you've got the money laundering, and then people fall into other things. This is costing people lives, this prohibition.
Well, there's an old saying which is actually very true. If you want to make something popular in the UK, you just make it illegal, don't you? And then people want to try it. I think it's time for us to look at all of these things. But I mean, I'm not unconvinced that there might be darker things behind all the drug trade. And I've passed details of people who are engaged in child trafficking into the UK. Names of all those. They've gone to the government. Nobody wants to act. Nobody wants to act about it.
How big is this? It's
big.
How many?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
How are they getting them in? Or is that?
I don't. They're flying them into small airports that haven't got fences around them. Lots of them in the UK.
Yeah, lots of small airfields. You have a little biplane.
I gave the government the names of the people and the name of the company they're laundering the money through, where the children were being taken to have their photographs taken. They thought they were going to go to school. These were for selling them to paedophiles. Nothing. No, it's gone to MI5. It's gone to the National Crime Agency. No one will act. And then when you see the names, you see why.
The names.
The names of the people. They are known names.
And so they're taking these children to who knows where, and they're doing who knows what to
Well,
them.
I'm told that they use them in the sex trade for about 3 years, and then they're worn out, and then they organ harvest them. No one's interested. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about lots of things.
How much does the secret handshake brigade have to do with?
I don't know. The people keep saying I'm a Mason. I was asked 3 times, not for the last 20 years, and I always refused. I always said I didn't want to be a Mason, be a Freemason, because somebody says he's only got where he has because he's a Mason. I think I've got where I am because I'm not a Mason now. That's probably nearer the truth.
If you're a Freemason, I don't think you'd be broke and having your life fall apart.
Yeah, but I mean, I could have sold my soul to the devil. I don't think I'd ever be able to afford to buy it back, though, would I? So we'll stay where we are.
So how many Freemasons do you think there are in Parliament? Because if they are,
it's not something I've ever really looked into. I imagine there's probably quite a lot, and there's also a lot in the legal profession, isn't there? And the police. I defended. I wrote a conduct letter to one of the security guards, the police in Parliament, because he'd come to me and said, "You won't believe this, Andrew." He said, "I've got an internal disciplinary against me for conduct, and my boss has said if I was lodged up, it'd go away." And I wrote a letter to parliamentary security and said, "I'll be very disappointed if you're saying that someone had to be a member of the Freemasons to, and then you could make disciplinary matters go away. So I get the impression that you've conducted a bit of a witch hunt against this man." I got it dropped, but they hounded him out about 2 years ago. He was a pain in the backside. He was a straight copper in there, and then they basically made him an offer he couldn't refuse to go away.
So all the all or part of the security is controlled by this group.
It would appear that they are
which means
actively encouraged to be Freemasons.
Which means they can plant stuff, they can do investigations, they can find certain things, and they can also make certain things disappear, and no one saw them. And that's
they made the drugs the drugs bust in Portcullis House go away. And of course, everyone in the media in the lobby knew about it. I knew about it, so of course they know about it, but no one wrote about it, didn't they?
You talk about... So the media's involved in this. Okay, you've got riddled all the way through Parliament, and you've got issues with the courts as well. But I want to ask, in terms of the mass migration, because the mass migration is also a big factor in this country.
Yeah,
because you've talked about having referenda and direct democracy.
Well, yes, people should be deciding how many, and overwhelmingly people would want to reduce migration. That was what was promised by the so-called Conservative government for the last 5 years. It's not been delivered. That's one of the sticks that the electorate quite rightly will beat them with. But they never intended to. They never intended to. Clearly the British government's colluding with the French to ship these people over. I'm told by people who monitor, they're coming over now on very large dinghies, aren't they?
They are people trafficking. They are people smuggling.
Yes. Well, I mean,
the government are the smugglers.
Yes. Look at the numbers on the dinghies. They're sending them back and reusing them. The same numbers coming over again and again and again. How do they get the dinghies back?
They're giving them.
Yes.
Can't they destroy them? Well,
if you look at the pictures and you've got the numbers on those huge black inflatable things, which are, if they're the same numbers week after week after week, I can only presume that they're moving them back, aren't they? They're taking them back. They've been taking them back for a long time. The French bring them halfway, they arrange, and then our coast guards go and drag them in. I mean, there are 80-odd% males between the age of 18 and 39. All the ones who were in hotels in Northwest Leicestershire are all males. Where are the women and children? What sort of people, would run away from a bad situation and leave the women and children?
You see that people...
It's normally the other way around. You'd normally send the women and children, the men should stop and sort it out. And then women could come back when it's safe.
And they pass through however many safe countries that they'd be perfectly fine in.
Yeah, even your most ardent Francophobe couldn't say that France is not a safe country to claim asylum if you needed to. I mean, whatever the reason is, they'd rather come here. Well, most of my constituents would rather they didn't.
Well, it's asylum shopping, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the point of it? Some people say it's to cause unrest, to destabilise things. Other people see it as a way to just rig the electoral system because they bring people in.
It could be all of those things, couldn't it?
They have people vote in our elections who aren't from any British descent, and most people wouldn't consider to be British. And
what I will say is that when I used to turn up at the 2 migrant hotels in my constituency, I would do it unannounced, and the security guards would come out. And bear in mind, the security guards had pointed out to me that they weren't there to keep the migrants in; they were there to keep me out.
The Member of Parliament.
Oh, and then I told them who I was, and then I'd say, "Well, can you tell me how many migrants you've got here? You know, what's going on?" "We can't tell you anything." I said, "Well, I'm a Member of Parliament. You're in my constituency. And I can tell you now, those security guards were ex-armed forces. You could tell by the way they moved, the way they talk. They were very recently ex-armed forces."
Why?
I mean, just, you can tell.
What do you think about birthright citizenship? Because a lot of people have a problem with it. For example, if I were born in China because my mother happened to be there, or happened to be staying there or working there, it wouldn't make me Chinese. Or Italy, or any other country in the world. Apart from this one, of course, because it's my home. Do we need to move away from birthright citizenship? Because there are colonies developing, segregated colonies in this country.
I don't know. It's not top of my priority list, to be honest. We've got to stop illegal migrants coming in. The analogy I've always used with people is, you know, if we were a member of the Working Men's Club in Colville, and we came in on Monday morning, and someone had broken in over the weekend, eaten the peanuts, was sitting on the carpet and said, "I want to be a member of the club. I've just broken in because I want to be a member of the club, and I want you to have a whip round for my membership," I don't think we'd let them in, would we?
No.
No, they've just smashed the window and got in, committed an illegal act. And I don't think you get membership of the club. And basically, the illegal migrants coming across, I mean, they're also, they're queue jumping, aren't they? And making a mockery of the legal system, which is far too generous anyway. I mean, we were going to have a points-based system, weren't we? What happened to all that?
Well, that's what I asked when I was in the Tory party.
And also, I mean, I say, the Rwanda, anyone, I told the whips, and I know that John Renwood and different people, David Day, we all told them, we've been in Parliament long enough, looked at the referendums, it's never going to stop the votes. It's not, this Rwanda deal it's just window dressing. It's not real. And Rishi Sunak knew that 18 months, 2 years ago, but they've carried on. It's just a show. It's just a pantomime for the people. That they're doing something, and we never
Punch and Judy.
No intention of ever sending anybody to Rwanda. You know, and the foreign aid budget, or as we used to call it, money laundering. You know, that's just giving these NGOs money, and you know, Ukraine war. Every time we're shipping money out, taxpayers' money out, you can smell the corruption.
Is migration the main thing destroying the lives of younger people?
Yeah, well, when I left school a long time ago, I mean, I was competing with people from all over the UK for those jobs. I mean, now our young people are competing for people all over the world, aren't they? The competition has ramped up. Yeah.
The price of houses has gone through the roof.
We're not, well, yeah, if
it's becoming a dream. It seems to me.
Well, you've got to own nothing and be happy, aren't you?
Yeah, it seems to me.
Well, I already own nothing, and I'm not happy. I can tell.
Well, you're happier than you would be selling your soul.
Well, indeed.
It seems like it's moving towards a feudal system. Either you have property, you have a house,
yes,
or you are starved.
And of course, they love high inflation, which is all caused by printing money that didn't really exist, creating the lockdowns and the furlough scheme. As if everybody doing that was, I mean, that was totally predictable. We'd have a massive surge of inflation, and inflation destroys the poor, and the rich are protected from it because they've got all the assets. So that the chance of that first rung on the ladder, that's just pulling the ladder away with inflation.
And the wages are all pressed down.
Yeah.
And then it
And they say people have we've got to get inflation under control. The working man and woman didn't cause the inflation. The elites caused the inflation, and they knew it was going to cause the inflation, and they don't mind because they own all the assets.
So I want to ask, how long were you in the Tory party?
I first joined in 1983 when I was at university.
How's it changed?
Well, I was a very moderate Thatcherite, and I haven't gone anywhere. And now I'm sort of, apparently I call this far right. Anyone who doesn't agree with uncontrolled migration now is far right. Anyone who questions any of the narratives, whether that's about net zero, which is complete fantasy science, the vaccine safety and efficacy, you're a conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer. I took the vaccine, they hurt me. I'm an anti-vaxxer or anti-scientific, and I'm one of the few MPs who've actually have got a science degree.
I say more than that, you practice a scientific method because science is a method.
Yes.
It's not an office. It's not a qualification. It is a method. And
Yes.
if you practice that, then you are a
scientific method, which we've just disregarded all of that, and certainly doesn't apply in the chamber of the House of Commons. But that is why when I gave my speeches on those issues around the vaccine safety, efficacy, excess deaths, the MPs couldn't turn up and debate me because everything was scientifically irrefutable that I was giving. I mean, I'd had my speech and all the information checked by top scientists to make sure there was no holes to be knocked in it. Because I could give 100 facts, and if I got one wrong, then the media only talk about the one I got wrong, not the 99 that were right. So I had to make sure they were all right. And then that only left the mainstream media the option of, don't talk about it. You can't knock holes in what he said, so it never happened.
And the party controls you. But when was it that you think that the party changed? Because you were elected in a very unusual way in this constituency.
I was elected in an unusual way. Selected as in an unusual way to be the candidate because I was the last open primary that they had. So it was the electorate, the wider electorate. But they were willing to do that because they said they're never going to win. So it was like it doesn't really matter.
Which allowed people to
choose me to be their candidate for the Conservative Party. But in a seat that the Conservative Party weren't going to put any money into, I wasn't supposed to win, so it didn't really matter. Well, I did win, and I put my own money into it. So yeah, that was the difference.
But they've polished that now, and what they use is the Parliamentary Assessment Board, because some people are talking about some sort of takeover of the Tory party, and I always try and stress
the whole
that
thing
this is
impossible.
From what you have is you have the leader. The leader chooses the chairman. The chairman controls the Parliamentary Assessment Board.
And the World Economic Forum choose the leader.
And
all the leader candidates.
And chooses the candidates to be MPs.
Yeah.
Right? The MPs then, in turn, choose the leader. And the only vote that the members actually get is in a CCP style, okay, you can pick one of our two candidates. So would you like a wet candidate, or do you want a wet candidate with a different haircut?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same in all the parties. And people are thinking, oh, we're in this general election and it's all on the news every night and they're at it hammer and tongs against each other. There's very little between the parties. On all the big issues that will change people's lives, there's nothing between the parties. They're completely committed to Agenda 2030. I think I posted on Twitter the other day that Labour's plan to decarbonise in 6 years. Get rid of all the gas-powered power. So 45% of electricity comes from gas. The grid couldn't take all the electricity requirement if we decarbonise, but they're going to do it in 6 years. That will involve, the only way to do that is power cuts. I just ration the energy out so you didn't have any. Or you could vote Conservative, who are also committed to Agenda 2030 to decarbonise. They're just going to do it to you slower. That's your choice. Conservatives will make you poorer, colder and less free, but probably slightly slower than the Labour Party. So you think you've got a race between the blue team and the red team to the finish line in this general election in a couple of weeks' time or so. It's not. It's a uniparty relay race. It's merely a baton handover. The globalists have run the blue horse into the ground. It's on its knees. It's died. And now they're going to wheel out a nice fresh red horse, completely controlled by the same people, and fool the public. The only losers in the general election are going to be the British public, and I'm pretty determined that's it's not going to happen. Not in Northwest Leicestershire anyway. If I can have my way.
Well, what I see happening is I think we've got two extreme far left parties. You've got two parties which think they can just completely have complete
Well, they're very
dominance.
authoritarian, aren't they? For sure.
Yeah, a complete state control. If you look at the way they control business, the way they control speech, the way they control movement, okay, the way they control all of these
No
regulated...
separation of powers between the judiciary and the legislature now.
And you've got these regulated professions which allow them to control you. So theoretically...
Government and WEF money, which is the Pioneer Regulatory Pioneer Fund. So they're all taking money from the WEF and government. And
it's one of the ways they control them, because you have the doctors. So to be a doctor, you need a license to practice.
GMC.
Okay. If you do anything that steps out of line, that's how many years of medical school destroyed?
Yeah.
Everything.
6, 7, yeah.
All of that.
And then you've got the same with the solicitors, the SRA. They're getting money from Pioneer Fund from the WEF as well. And so any lawyers who step out of line, and they're just getting thrown out of the profession.
And now
Civil Aviation Authority are also getting the money. All the regulators are getting the money.
And then you've got the state schools as well. To be a teacher, you try setting up an independent school, you try setting up an independent hospital. I believe there was a fantastic private hospital. It was big in Scotland, and they lied. They shut it down. I mean, I would love one day to set up my own school, but I know I'm a tutor, but it's impossible, because what they will do is they will you try jumping through their hoops, and they'll find out any reason, and they'll just shut you down. It's like I say to some of the parents, they say, "Oh, do I respond to the council when they have these sort of requests? Oh, we want to just check how your kid's doing." I say, if you respond, if you let them into your home, they'll see them do their English, they'll see them do their maths, and they'll see them get one maths question wrong, and they'll write down, "Oh, has trouble with maths." Right? That trouble with maths, oh, they've got trouble in their subjects, right? That then gets written up in another report. Clearly, they have issues with the way they're being taught at home. That gets written into another report. This is, okay, it's something that needs intervention. Oh, we've got to have some sort of plan. And then eventually they can just take these children away. And obviously in the care system, I was imprisoned in there. It's horrific.
It's anything but care, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ministry of Love.
Yeah, the so-called care system.
Yep.
Have you had constituents come to you about that? About children being taken away?
Yep. Poor people, they're not scared of the police in England. They're scared of social services because they take your kids. And I think we're going to end, I've been given some information on the care services, and they're taking thousands of children into care every week, so-called care. And obviously, the inflation, the cost of energy, food, things that you have to buy. And then it's very easy for them to go into a single mother and say, "Look, what's your income? Yeah. You can't keep these children. You can't keep these children because look, your rent's that, food bills that, your electricity bills that. You can't keep the children," and they're petrified, absolutely petrified. And it is generally anything but care.
How many parents or family members have come to you?
Quite a few, and obviously they're worried. They're worried because as they can see the economic squeeze coming on, the pressure's only coming on more of them. A lot of children being taken in the northeast of England. Absolutely.
And at the same time, you've got the state indoctrination system or maleducation system, which means that essentially people who are like us, who may wish to change public opinion to a more liberal perspective. Now I say liberal in the actual meaning of the word, because I can read a dictionary. We're fighting an uphill battle because we have to de-radicalise every single child or a vast minority of those children who've been through the system.
Yeah.
They're just rigging it again and again. You've got 90% of kids.
All we got was implemented from 2019 was the WHO, the World Health Organization's European guidance of education children's sexuality, which was completely age inappropriate. And that these are documents that have been around for quite a while.
It's child abuse.
It was child abuse, and I've been pushing the government. I tried to bring in the Child Protection and Parental Rights Bill as a private member's bill, and that was voted down by both parties.
So the Tories are voting down parents having rights.
And it's interesting because when I explained what my bill's got, I wasn't actually needing any new powers. It only to implement the law as it actually stands at the moment, which was really interesting that they voted down implementing. It's like parents having the right to see what their children are being taught. Statutory right, which they have, but never being able. It was being frustrated. The fact that indoctrinating children in schools with gender ideology is against the Education Act 1995, because you're not allowed to teach children an ideology. Everything has to be balanced. There is no balance. They just were teaching. And, the CAST review actually came out, again, a few weeks ago. It's been delayed for 8 months, 9 months. And said, it's all a big mistake. We shouldn't have done it. I asked the Secretary of State, how many children does she calculate through the state system have suffered under this abuse? Because that's child abuse. What they've been now, she's saying it's wrong. But what the government have actually very clever. They've conned the electorate again. The Conservatives have conned them and said, oh yes, if we stopped it. They haven't stopped it. They've put it out for a consultation, which they know that Labour will be the next government. They're not going to accept the consultation. It's not stopping. They're still teaching the children exactly the same. They're still pushing the gender ideology.
You had
an absolute con.
A few hours ago, you had a girl come up to you, and she was almost 18.
Yeah.
And she said that she was extremely worried that Rishi Sunak had said a man is a man and a woman is a woman. That was worrying her. that was what terrified her, and she's almost 18.
Yeah,
I've seen kids who have been taken on with this, gender lie. And just to clarify, human beings don't have gender. Human beings have sex. Gender is a linguistic term. So this entire thing is one big farce.
I met a young lady who would be about 15, and her mother in Parliament who came to see me, and the 15-year-old had recorded on her phone being threatened by a teacher at her school with expulsion because she said it was ridiculous that school were letting her friend identify as a cat. I mean, what chance have the children got? This is madness. But they can't say that the person who was identifying as a cat needed some probably mental health support, because then the next step is that someone who's saying that, a boy that's saying they're a girl or a girl saying they're a boy, they might need some mental health support.
Well, if you have someone who's anorexic, you don't tell them that they're fat.
No.
If they're the skin and bones, you don't tell them that they're fat, because that's going to hurt them. That's going to endanger them, and that is abusive.
But you see, Chairman Mao did exactly the same as if you think of it. Nothing that's being done to the children or us, anyone else, it's all been done before. It's all been tried before. On the Cultural Revolution, you remember that Chairman Mao, he made everyone, male or female, had to wear the same clothes. You couldn't tell the gender. Everyone had to have their head shaved.
Not gender.
Sex. They had to have the head shaved. Women couldn't wear makeup and jewellery. You couldn't tell who was what. It was a way of destroying all of that. It's all been done before. It's being done again.
You see it in 1984. They wanted to abolish the orgasm. Except for when they've got their children that they've trafficked, of course.
Probably.
So if you had kids of that age, would you be sending them to school, state school? Or even, the thing is, would you send them even to public school now, considering that so many of the teachers are doing the exact same thing?
Well, it's all being enforced across the board. Well, what we need to do is I need to get back into Parliament and make sure, after the election, that we stop doing what is effectively child abuse. But you can see a Labour government with a very progressive agenda and having a big majority, they're going to be emboldened to do whatever they want.
In this constituency, a lot of people are getting confused as to what party you're in. You're an independent candidate.
Yes.
So people shouldn't be voting Reform if they want to vote for you. They shouldn't be voting Conservative if they want to vote for you. Why is it that Reform are standing against you being as you seem to be really fighting for freedom. And why is it that Tice came out and said that you weren't welcome in the party?
Because he said that I got it wrong on the vaccines, and I would maintain that Tice got it wrong on the vaccines. He's not a big enough man to admit that. He's also got it wrong on Ukraine. He went out there a few weeks ago. He's all for the war. He also got it wrong on no jab, no job, Charlie Mullins. There's also a big Remainer. And what I can tell you now, which is a bombshell, is that Reform, supposedly you're a sceptic, don't want to talk about, and they won't talk about, and neither will the Conservatives, because it's all uni-party policy. Labour have already committed, they're taking us into a defence pact with the European Union. So that's in their manifesto on their computer.
So a new NATO.
We're already in NATO. We don't need a defence pact with the European Union. The European Union are enforcing the defence and security union across all member states. That's the only deal on offer. Labour are going to take us into it. They're going to use the threat of the war with Russia as the reasoning behind it. And it's basically a rejoin conspiracy under the table between all the parties, and Reform aren't willing to speak out on it, which makes them complicit. The Defence and Security Union, which Labour will take us into.
EU army.
Well, there's no EU army because there is no EU army, but it's better than that for the EU. It gives the EU control of all the member states' armies. And this will give the European Union, the unelected leader, currently Ursula von der Leyen, full control of the UK's Army, Navy, Air Force, MI5, MI6, GCHQ, access to the Five Eyes, and our local police forces.
And on nuclear weapons?
Yes.
So this is now a mega state. This is something that Orwell talks about. Eurasia, East Asia, Oceania.
Well, it's a far worse situation, than we were in, as far as sovereignty is concerned, than we were in before we left. It's worse than before we left the European Union. How can anyone be a sovereign nation when you don't have control of your own armed forces, secret services, or your own police? And it's an unelected, appointed EU commissioner.
And so we could see Germans
but should that come as a surprise when all of Parliament doesn't want to talk about handing over powers to the WHO, the World Health Organization, an unelected, unaccountable, non-tax-paying anywhere in the world, because it's an arm of the United Nations, immune from prosecution, diplomatic immunity for all WHO employees, and giving the Director General the ability to call a public health emergency of international concern, declare a pandemic for a human, animal, or environmental threat, and then seize his power over all our elected so-called representative democracies, absolute power, for as long as that emergency continues, and they decide when the emergency is over, giving all those powers to a power-hungry organisation mired in controversy all the time, the WHO. Do you think that's going to lead to more emergencies or less emergencies when they only get the powers when they declare an emergency? Bear in mind that the COVID emergency was only advisory, and that was 3 years. And then we had the monkeypox public health emergency of international concern after that on running. So that would have been, 5 years where they would have taken the power away from elected representatives? Why would it then surprise you that there's a collusion across politics to give control of our armed forces away to the European Union? I mean, this is all in line. We're giving away tax policy away to the OECD to decide our corporate tax rates. That's under stuff that Osborne had done. And I'll take you back to something I said to Osborne and Cameron in 2011. Because I'm coming from a business background, and what we've delivered in Northwest Leicestershire is the improvements to the standard of living and economic prosperity of my constituents locally through local initiatives. I said to Cameron and Osborne, because they were lauded that they're these great politicians. I said to them, we don't really need politics. Politics is when I'm selling you something that's not going to be any good for you, and I've got to make you buy it and like it. It's a snake oil salesman. I said, what we need is policies that are going to improve the lives of our constituents, make them happier, feel safer, improve their economic outlook and the prospects for their children. So as long as we do that, we'll get re-elected, because that's delivering for the people. And Cameron Osborne said to me at the time, "You don't understand, Andrew, it's all a game." Well, having seen what's gone on over the last 5 years, I think I do understand what they mean now. And yes, they're just playing a different game. And that is the Punch and Judy pantomime that you see played out in Parliament all the time. Well, all the time, they're actually colluding to stitch up the people. And those policies I've just told you about the Defence Union, the WHO, it's very interesting that they're all sort of been slid in there. No one wants to talk about, the leaders' debates. They didn't say, "Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, you're signing our army to the unelected EU."
Which could see German command after 2 world wars, could see Germans in command of British armed forces.
Well, I was the MP that under Cameron, when I got tipped off that our troops in Bosnia were wearing the EU symbol on their uniforms, made them take it off.
We could see foreign armies stationed in this country,
Yes.
and our army used to go and suppress
Somebody else.
people fighting
And our
back in other
police.
countries.
And our police as well. Our local police forces would come under EU control.
Who is behind it all? Who are the shadowy powers behind everything? What is it? Some people say
It's Agenda 2030, and all the parties are committed to Agenda 2030. And you read through the lines, they want to break down the borders between countries. I mean, that's why they hated it that much, that we had a referendum and the people voted to leave the European Union. It just makes us far harder to manage.
Do they want some sort
And
of...
they hated it, Trump being elected in 2016. That's why I think they're pushing on so fast now with Agenda 2030, inflicting low traffic neighbourhoods on people who never voted for them, didn't want them, 15-minute cities.
Keeping people tied to the
pushing
area like
the lunacy of electric vehicles,
There aren't the minerals in the world.
There aren't the minerals. Any salt water on the batteries, they can explode. You can't take them on ferries across the North Sea because they can't get the insurance. That explosion in a battery of an electric vehicle in Luton Airport car park took the whole car park out. I mean, what's your insurance going to be? The guidance now, if you have an electric vehicle and you have a bump on the motorway, because of the risk of the damage to the battery and the explosion, the official guidelines are, it has to go into a garage and have no other vehicle within 45 feet of any direction. How big a garage are you going to need to repair electric vehicles with 45 feet all round, no other vehicles? It's just ludicrous. These are policies to destroy people's freedoms, livelihoods. It's pure propaganda. There's no science behind any of this.
So your solution to this is independence and direct democracy.
Well,
Explain how you think that'll work.
Well, when we expose what's really been going on across government, it's going to be a huge breakdown of trust, quite rightly, in health, science and politics. And people are going to have to be held to account. People who've been in positions of responsibility, they want the pay, they want the perks, but they never want to take responsibility for their actions. And it's only that is going to restore any public confidence that people are not going to do this to them again. And it's been done for a very, very long time. The fact is now that people are waking up, aren't they? You saw that on the doorsteps today and on the streets.
Lots of people support
Lots of people are waking up, and they're not going back to sleep. Which is why we need they need a big war to look over here and give you something to worry about, and everything else just slips away. What's been shocking is that all the institutions there to protect the public interest have failed, whether that's the medical regulators, the health guidelines, they've all failed. Parliament's failed. I'm sorry. Parliament, which I've been a part of, I've done my best, but we have failed the people, which is, and the government are getting the blame, but it's the Uni Party, it's the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats and the SNP as well. They're all party to it, of the not talking about the WHO, not talking about excess deaths, not talking about vaccine harms, not talking about really the impact of net zero and a policy that's probably going to cost £5 trillion to implement. What, and Labour are going to do it in 6 years? This is crazy. Absolute madness. And it's all unnecessary anyway. We're not in a climate emergency. There is no climate emergency. But the politicians have realised that keeping people poorer, badly educated and indoctrinated, ill and scared makes people much easier to control. This is about control of the population. I don't think we're going to have many more elections like the one that we're having in a couple of weeks' time, quite honestly, because the system is so broken. If it was up to me, I would get rid of the House of Lords immediately. I think no one's spoken up from the House of Lords. They've not protected the public interest. I would get rid of half of the MPs. And I would say that if you serve as an MP, you have no external interests. You can have no external interests at all while you're an MP. And I would have referendums every 3 months on all the legislation and public debate so that the public became the government again. Democracy is from the Greek. Demos is the people and kratos is power. I don't think the people feel very powerful. I think they're actually in fear of what Parliament's going to do to them next and inflict on them. I think we've got into a situation where politicians have forgotten that we work for the people. We work for the people. They don't work for us. We answer to the people. That's all been lost. We're currently in a situation, to paraphrase Tony Benn, where the people are scared of the politicians, and that is tyranny. That's where we are. What are they going to inflict on us next? And we need to get back to a situation where the politicians are scared of the people, and that's democracy.
You've talked about how you want independence, but is that really a scalable model? Because Robert Michels has his iron law of oligarchy, that everything trends towards oligarchy in the long run. Is a party not a better system?
No, parties are totally open to corruption and whipping, and we're supposed to speak in the chamber of the House of Commons without fear or favour, which is something I've tried to do. What I know is in that chamber there is a lot of fear and there's a lot of favour, and that's wrong, and it's not in the public interest. And the number of MPs who've come to me over the last 2 years admitted they've had family members or themselves severely vaccine harmed. We're talking about heart attacks, heart conditions, strokes, and they still won't speak out. They still won't speak out and tell the truth and protect their own constituents.
So they've corrupted our courts, whether that's overt corruption, whether it's the debasement of juries.
They've corrupted our police.
You're aware of the debasement of juries, which happened in '67. So it's no longer unanimous. You can have 2 people out of 12 say that you're innocent, and you can still be locked up.
Yep.
You've got non-British people sitting on juries.
To be honest, with the jury trial is the best chance you've got. But they know so much information on profiling now that they can select a jury to give a decision, can't they? Mm. Because they have so much information they've collected on individuals that they can profile them to favour a certain decision. And all the barrels. Now, I think we're still in a situation where not every apple in the barrel is rotten. But the apples at the top of all the institutional barrels are rotten. And any apple that wants to rise to the top of the barrel has to be rotted. And so we've got to take the top off all the barrels. That's where we are now.
If you don't get in, and if we don't see major political change, will it end in bloodshed? Will it end in a civil war? How can this ever be resolved? If they control so many of the institutions, and if we don't see rapid progress in this?
Well, what they don't control is that the people are many, and the people inflicting the corruption and the horror on us are relatively few. And I just think the people are waking up far too fast. And it's not just in this country, it's around the world.
But are you scared for your life?
Oh, I was told a year last... Well, they did the suicide thing on me in the January, and then in the February they came and told me, you can speak out all you want to on the vaccines, Andrew. You're vaccinated, you'll be dead of cancer soon. That's what they told me a year last February.
Who?
A very senior cabinet minister, a man who got me into politics 25 years ago.
What's it that keeps you going?
What keeps me going is the duty I have to my constituents, and the thousands and thousands of emails I get every week from around the world and all across the UK, and also the love I feel on the doorsteps in Northwest Leicestershire and on every street I walk in the country. And also, I'm not isolated in Parliament, because although there's politicians in there who won't speak to me, and I eat on my own and speak on my own and keep myself to myself as far as the politicians are concerned, there are 4,000 odd real people who work in Parliament, the cooks and the cleaners and the security guards and the clerks, and 80% of those are with me. And whenever I walk out of Parliament at night, and as long as there's no one else on the corridor, when one of the lovely black ladies who does the cleaning of the floors at the evening, she'll always come up to me and whisper in my ear, Andrew, we're all praying for you, keep going. So how could you not?
You need help.
Yeah.
What help? What do you need people to do to get you re-elected?
We need boots on the ground. To be honest, the last couple of weeks, we've got more. I've got 23 people out tomorrow. I need people in Northwest Leicestershire. I've got a lot of support out there. All the farmers who normally would put my advertising boards up, they're feeling intimidated. They told me, yeah, we'll support you, but we don't want in boards on it. We can't put the boards up. So they've seen what they've done to me. It's a bit like the members of staff, the two men I employed full time in my parliamentary office, based in Northwest Leicestershire.
You told me 17 years.
One of them was 17 years.
You brought him in when he was 20?
20, 37, 38, yeah.
You paid him over 50 grand a year?
Yeah, and I said, look, I've been kicked out of the Conservative Party. You can't stay in the Conservative Party and work for me. What do you want to do? Come with me. And the two men said they were going to stay with the Conservative Party. And I said, well, why? You've come on this journey with me for 17 years. You've seen all the evidence build up. You know that everything I've said in the chamber or to the media that they won't report, it's all true. The vaccines are not safe and effective. You stopped taking them a long time ago and you stopped them going to your kids and your wife because you knew you're not taking them because they're not safe and effective. And he said, yeah, but he said, we've seen what the party has done to you reputationally and financially over the last, so many years, and we don't want it done to us. So I said to them, well, so what you mean is you're not man enough to stand up for your own wife and kids. You want me to do it for you. And they didn't answer that, and that's the last thing I ever said to them. 17 years working for me. They knew 100% that everything I was saying was true, but they were so intimidated they wouldn't even stand up to protect their own wives and children.
I think this is one of the most important interviews I've ever done. Look into that camera. Thousands upon thousands of people, I'm sure, are going to watch this.
And I've prayed more the last 3 years than I've ever prayed in my life. And I know you're not a believer, but I've prayed a lot. And mostly what I've prayed for, that I was completely wrong about what was going on with the vaccines, because life would have been so much easier. And I could have just said, yep, I've got it all wrong. I'm really sorry. I'll just resign as an MP and finish. Unfortunately, I'm not wrong. I'm 100% right. And they admitted it to me. They've all admitted it to me. Most of the MPs know that the vaccines are killing people. And they just put all of MPs of all parties put so much political capital behind the pandemic response that they just want to get to the general election and keep a lid on it because they're all finished. And that's why so many people are leaving Parliament, because of the lies they've told the people. How many hundreds and thousands of emails they've sent out saying these vaccines are safe and effective. Why are all the former health ministers resigning? Why is Zahawi suddenly resigning, vaccine minister who implemented it all? Well, it's a very small planet now, ladies and gentlemen, and there isn't anywhere for them to hide because they have committed crimes against humanity.
So people may be on the edge of their seats thinking, okay, maybe I'll help this guy. What's your pitch?
You'd be very welcome if you want to come and help us fight for democracy and humanity and keep a toehold for holding, truth to power in the House of Commons, the mother of all parliaments. I would appreciate your help. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Where can they find you?
At contact@abridgen.uk. And I have a website for the campaign, which is www.abridgen.uk. abridgen.uk, and you can follow me on Twitter, which is at abridgen.
Do you have a quote?
Do I have a quote?
Yeah, you've been quoting at me all day. You're giving me Kipling. You're giving me other people. You're a Christian. What's the
Yes.
saying that comes to mind that keeps you going?
Well, I would say that, we're going to win. The human spirit is irrepressible. There's massive horrors are being inflicted on humanity, not just in our country, but around the world. Don't worry. I've read the last page. God wins. We're going to win.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bridgen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like, a share, a subscribe, hit the notification button if you would like to help. We've got a Patreon and a Subscribe Star, so please head on over there and pledge us some support if you want to keep this journalism going. We've got a professional studio here and we could do with your support to keep these great conversations coming.